I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. The phone's ring sliced through the quiet of my home office, where I was buried under paperwork. It was Alex, his voice tight, barely concealing his distress. "Hey, man, I need to see you. It's urgent." The gravity in his tone set my nerves on edge. "Of course, Alex. What's going on? Are you alright?" I asked, already grabbing my keys and jacket. It's Liz," he choked out. "Just meet me at the Old Oak, you know, that little pub downtown. I'll explain everything there." 20 minutes later, I pushed open the dimly lit pub's door to find Alex slumped over a table in the back corner, a crumpled photo in one hand and a half-empty pint in the other. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. He looked up as I approached, a shadow of his usual self. "She cheated on me, man," he blurted, shoving the photo across the table. "With some guy. I caught them red-handed." I reached for the photo, my heart sinking in sympathy, ready to offer whatever support I could. But as my eyes focused on the image, my blood froze. There, in vivid color, was a picture of a couple locked in a passionate kiss, oblivious to the world around them. It wasn't just any couple, the woman was unmistakably my wife, Emily. And the man, our neighbor, Rick. "What the?" I gasped, my voice trailing off into disbelief. "Alex, this is Emily. My Emily." Alex's face turned from sorrow to confusion. "What? Are you sure? That can't be." I nodded, feeling a cold rage building inside me. "It's her, and that's Rick from across the street. I can't believe this." For a moment, we sat in stunned silence, the noise of the pub fading into a meaningless buzz. My mind raced with betrayal and fury. Emily, the woman I had shared my life with, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had deceived me in the most intimate way possible. "I need to think, Alex. I need to plan." My voice was calm, but inside, a storm was brewing. This isn't just about comforting you anymore. I've been played a fool too." Alex nodded, his own shock mingling with sympathy for my plight. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I promise you, Alex, they won't get away with this. Not without facing consequences." We parted ways with a firm handshake, a silent agreement that this betrayal would not go unaddressed. As I drove home, the image of Emily and Rick haunted me, each traffic light a glaring red echo of my anger and hurt. Arriving home, I found Emily in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cooked dinner, seemingly oblivious to the storm about to break. The normalcy of the scene was surreal, almost mocking. I clenched my fists, bracing myself. "Emily, we need to talk. Now." The kitchen air felt thick as I pulled out the photo, watching her face for any sign of guilt. "Care to explain this?" The story had only just begun, and the road to retribution was clear. This betrayal would reshape our lives, but I was determined to emerge from the wreckage, vindicated and free. The silence that fell over the kitchen was deafening. Emily turned slowly, her eyes widening as they landed on the incriminating photo. Her usual calm demeanor shattered, replaced by a panicked flutter of her hands towards her apron. "What is this, Mike? Why do you have this?" Her voice quivered, a mix of fear and confusion playing across her face. "Why don't you tell me, Em? I think you know exactly what this is." My words were icy, my arms crossed as I leaned against the doorframe, blocking any easy escape. She took a deep breath, her eyes darting towards the hallway, possibly considering her options. Finally, with a resigned sigh, she sank into a kitchen chair, her shoulders slumping. "It's not what it looks like, Mike." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're kissing our neighbor, Rick. In a restaurant, no less. Publicly." I slapped the photo down on the table for emphasis. "So, enlighten me, Emily. What exactly is it if not what it looks like?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she glanced at the photo again. I can explain, Mike. Please, just sit down. Let me explain. Reluctantly, I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, my anger simmering just below the surface. She wiped her eyes, took another deep breath, and began. It started a few months ago. It was nothing at first, just friendly talks when we bump into each other while jogging or at the store. But then, it became something else. Her voice was a whisper now, ashamed. And you didn't think to stop. To think about us, our marriage. My voice rose with each word, my hands clenched tightly beneath the table. I did, I swear I did. But it was like a compulsion, something I couldn't control. It was wrong, and I regret it so deeply, Mike. You have to believe me. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. The room spun slightly as her betrayal sank in deeper. The trust we had built over years seemed to crumble in the span of a single conversation. So, what now, Emily? What do you expect from me? I asked, the hurt clear in my voice. I don't know, Mike. I don't expect anything. Maybe, forgiveness, eventually. But I understand if that's too much. I just couldn't lie to you anymore. Not when you found out like this. Forgiveness felt like a foreign concept, an impossible feat at that moment. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. I need some air. We'll talk more when I've calmed down. Leaving Emily in the kitchen, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air did little to soothe my seething rage. Walking aimlessly down the street, my mind raced with thoughts of retribution. How could I make them pay for their deceit? The need for a plan, something to right the egregious wrong, consumed me. Somewhere between the sharp stabs of betrayal and the dull ache of heartbreak, a plan began to form, a way to reclaim some semblance of control and dignity from the wreckage of my marriage. Emily and Rick would not get away with this, not if I had anything to say about it. The path forward was fraught with darkness, but one thing was clear, retribution was inevitable, and it would be mine to exact. The night was long and restless. After hours of pacing the empty streets, I returned home, the house silent and dark. Emily was asleep, or at least pretending to be. The sight of her, so peaceful, contrasted sharply with the storm raging inside me. I couldn't bear the proximity, the shared space suddenly stifling. Grabbing a blanket, I headed to the living room sofa, my mind churning with plans of retribution. Morning light eventually crept through the blinds, bringing a new day but no solace. I had made a decision, one that felt like the only path forward. I would confront Rick, face the man who dared disrupt my life so callously. With determination fueling my steps, I crossed the street to Rick's house. The doorbell echoed through the quiet morning, a harbinger of the confrontation to come. Rick answered, his casual smile fading when he saw my expression. Mike, what's? We need to talk. Now, I cut him off, pushing past him into the foyer. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound a definitive marker of the seriousness of our discussion. Rick's face hardened as he realized this was no friendly visit. If this is about the... It's exactly about that, Rick. How long? I demanded, my voice low and controlled. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Mike, I know this looks bad, but... Looks bad? You think? I scoffed. How long, Rick? Few months, he admitted, unable to meet my eyes. It was never meant to hurt anyone. Things just got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated, the anger bubbling up. You betrayed me, your neighbor, your friend. And Emily, I trailed off, the pain sharp in my chest. Rick finally looked up, remorse flickering in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mike. Truly. If there's anything I can. Save it. You'll pay for this. I'll make sure of it. The threat hung heavy in the air, my resolve as firm as the ground beneath my feet. Rick took a step back, the gravity of the situation dawning on him. "What are you planning to do?" "That's for me to know. Just be ready." With that, I turned and left, leaving Rick to his guilt and fear. The next part of my plan required more than confrontation, it needed precision and legal advice. I spent the morning in consultations with a lawyer, detailing the situation and seeking guidance on the most impactful legal actions. Divorce was inevitable, but I intended to go further, ensuring that the affair would cost both Rick and Emily more than they bargained for. By afternoon, I had a clear legal path forward, one that would leverage the fullest extent of the law against them. I also decided to expose their affair publicly. If they sought secrecy for their betrayal, I would grant them infamy. As the day waned, I prepared the necessary documents and crafted a detailed post for social media. Each word was measured, each sentence designed to expose and condemn. With a deep breath, I published the post, watching as the digital proof of their indiscretion began to spread. Sitting back, I felt the first twinge of satisfaction, a cold comfort in the wake of my shattered trust. The road ahead would be tumultuous, but I was ready. Retribution had begun, and there was no turning back. The fallout from the revelations was immediate and devastating. As the digital whispers turned into roaring debates, the reputations of Emily and Rick crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Friends took sides, the community gossiped, and the isolation pushed them further into despair. Yet, my thirst for retribution was far from quenched. I watched from the shadows of anonymity as their lives began to unravel, ensuring that every legal and social blow was delivered with precision. Emily attempted to reach out several times, her messages a mix of pleas and apologies, but I dismissed them all. My heart had hardened beyond recognition, the man who once loved her now gone. A week later, I orchestrated the final act of my revenge. Under the guise of a supposed truce, I invited both Emily and Rick to a meeting at a local, secluded park, neutral ground where I promised to discuss the terms of my forgiveness. The offer was a ruse, a means to an end. As they arrived, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass, I could see the apprehension etched on their faces. Emily looked frail, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Rick was tense, his movements jittery. "Mike, thank you for meeting us," Emily started, her voice trembling. We hope we can find some way to save it, Emily." "I didn't bring you here for reconciliation," I interrupted coldly, stepping closer with a steely gaze. "This is about finality. My lawyer will be in touch with the divorce papers by tomorrow. As for you, Rick," I turned my attention to him, "you'll wish you never moved into our neighborhood." Rick swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously. "Mike, I'm sorry, man. I know I messed up, but nothing," I cut him off. "You destroyed my life, and I'll make sure your future is a reflection of the pain you caused." With that, I turned to leave, but not before tossing a small, sealed envelope at their feet. "Consider that the last generosity you'll receive from me." Once I was a safe distance away, I watched as Rick tentatively opened the envelope. Inside, I had placed evidence of further damning communications I'd intercepted between him and another woman, communications that predated his affair with Emily. As he pulled out the contents, his face drained of color, realizing the additional chaos that was about to unfold in his personal life. Emily gasped, reading over his shoulder. "Rick? How could you?" The betrayal within their own illicit affair was the final, cruel twist I had engineered. As they argued, their voices rising in shock and anger, I felt a bitter satisfaction. This was the closure I needed, not the forgiveness or the reconciliation, but the assurance that they felt a fraction of the pain they had inflicted upon me. I walked away from the park, the echoes of their heated argument fading behind me. The path forward was solitary, but it was one I accepted. Betrayal had cost me my marriage and a friend, but it had also awakened a ruthless part of my soul I never knew existed. As the sun set, Casting the day into shadow, I realized that some wounds would never truly heal, and some paths were meant to be walked alone. The end of this chapter was also the beginning of another, my life, anew, built on the ruins of treachery.